I think that there are some real concerns with homeschooling, especially in Ohio, since it's changed in the last couple of years.
What was happening with the Ciders children before they vanished from the classroom? We're going back 1 year before the children stopped going to school, because what we found may explain how they fell through the cracks. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix.
6 children, 1 school district, an entire academic year, and not a single day in a classroom. That's not an exaggeration. That's not a worst-case scenario I'm painting for effect. That is exactly what happened to the 6 oldest Cers children during the 2021 school year in Gallia County, Ohio. The school district confirmed it. The truancy complaints prove it. And yet, here's what I couldn't figure out when I first started digging into this case. How do 6 children simply not show up for school and nobody intervenes? What had to happen before that year for the system to fail them so completely? I've been sitting with that question for weeks now, and I think I've finally found the answer. It's not comfortable. It's not simple. But once you see the full timeline laid out, it becomes impossible to unsee. Let me walk you through what I've uncovered. The Cers children didn't just appear in Gallia County out of nowhere. They moved around. They lived in multiple homes across Gallia and Vinton counties. Neighbors gave different accounts of how many children they thought lived there. One neighbor told us he thought there were 9 kids at the house on Honeysuckle in Cheshire. 9. The reality was 16 children in total, but at that point, only the 6 oldest would have been school-aged. And those 6 were the ones who should have been sitting in classrooms, raising their hands, eating lunch in a cafeteria, being seen by mandatory reporters every single day.
The 16 Ciders children are in therapeutic foster care. They are safe, and hopefully they are with adults who are caring for them. But we haven't received an update about how exactly they are doing or what they went through in the house on Omer Street or the other homes where they lived in Gallia and Vinton counties over the years. I've told you before that the 6 oldest Ciders children were once enrolled in school in Gallia County. We verified that because long before Gary and Elizabeth Ciders were charged with child endangering, the Gallia County School District filed truancy complaints against Gary Ciders Jr. and Elizabeth in October 2021, stating that their 6 oldest children had not been to school at all that school year. The school district considered them habitually truant, and the children were in danger of being labeled unruly children, meaning they were disobedient or didn't show up for school. At that time, the 6 oldest children were enrolled at Addaville Elementary School.
Instead, something very different happened. Let me take you back to the 2020 school year, because that's where the paper trail begins to tell a story that I don't think anyone else has put together quite this way. In August of 2020, the world was still locked down. Schools everywhere were scrambling to figure out remote learning. And on August 26, 2020, Elizabeth Ciders enrolled her 6 oldest children in the Gallia County School District's online program, the Southern Ohio Digital Academy
School. But they didn't attend 1 day of school. Not one. But a year earlier, the children were enrolled in online school. At that time, the oldest Ciders child was 12, the second oldest was 11, the third was 9, the fourth was 8, the fifth was 7, and the 6th child was 6. For that 2020-2021 school year, the 6 Ciders children were enrolled in Gallia County's online school. Yes, you heard me right. They were enrolled in online school. I've confirmed the children were enrolled in the district's Southern Ohio Digital Academy. Whether the children were actually taking part in classes online, taking tests, and getting grades, we don't know. You might be asking yourself, now who exactly enrolled the kids in online school? Any guesses? Well, if you guessed Elizabeth Ciders, you are right. Of course, Elizabeth enrolled the children in school. Moms typically take care of all of that stuff. Trust me, I am one. Elizabeth enrolled the children in online school on August 26, 2020, so it would appear
she met the deadline. She filed the paperwork. On paper, she did everything a responsible parent was supposed to do. Now pause right there, because I need you to really absorb the significance of that date. August 26th. The enrollment deadline under Ohio statute is August 30th. Elizabeth waited until the final window. She didn't enroll them early. She didn't reach out to the district in July to get ahead of things. She waited until the last possible moment that still allowed her to be in compliance with the law. I'm not going to tell you what to make of that. I'm going to tell you what else we know, and let you draw your own conclusions. The children were enrolled. That much is confirmed. What we don't know is whether they ever actually logged in, whether they completed a single module, whether they spoke to a single teacher. The district can't release that information. Privacy laws prevent it, and so a massive question mark sits at the center of this case. 6 children were supposedly receiving an education through a screen, but there is no public record confirming that a single lesson was ever completed.
So it would appear that Elizabeth, the mother of the children, wanted her children to receive an education, but we don't know how active the children were in online school. The district isn't releasing that information, but in 2020, the world was locked down. A lot of districts were simply using online school. Enrollment in the online school in Gallia County went up. Now, during the last school year, Superintendent Philip Coon says 284 of the district's 2,100 students were actually homeschooled. That's different from online schooling. Philip Coon is going.
Here's where the timeline gets disturbing, because what happened next reveals a pattern that I believe explains how these children fell through every crack the system had. The 2020-2021 school year ends, summer passes, fall 2021 arrives. Elizabeth Ciders does something that, in retrospect, is chilling. She enrolls the 6 oldest children at Addaville Elementary School for in-person instruction. Not online, not homeschooling, actual brick and mortar school. So the mother, who had kept her children in online school during the pandemic, now makes the affirmative choice to enroll them in a physical building where they will be seen by teachers, by administrators, by other children, every single day. And then they never went. Not one day. The entire fall semester. The school district filed truancy complaints in October of 2021. By that point, the children had missed every single day of instruction for the school year. Habitually truant. In danger of being labeled unruly children. That's the legal language. What it means in plain English is that these 6 children were completely absent from the one place where adults are legally required to report signs of abuse and neglect. I want you to think about what that means from an investigative standpoint. In 2020, the children are enrolled in online school where nobody can physically see them. In 2021, they're enrolled in person but never attend. The net result is the same. No eyes on the children. No mandatory reporters within arm's reach. No lunch ladies noticing that a child is hoarding food. No gym teacher spotting bruises during a changing period. No school nurse asking why a child flinches at sudden movements. Now, was that intentional? I'm not going to answer that question for you. I'm going to keep showing you what the record reveals and let the pattern speak for itself.
I've told you about the house before. A woman who works nearby told us the house was so trashed after the Ciders moved out that the owner had to renovate the place. She said there was human and pet feces and urine in the house and trash. It was a mess. A neighbor across the street had told us that the kids mostly stayed in the house, but he had seen them playing outside. And at that time, he thought there were 9 children. So how much schooling was actually taking place in the house on Honeysuckle during the 2020-2021 school year? The district isn't telling us how often the Ciders children took part in school online. That is information the district can't release. But Elizabeth Ciders had just met the deadline.
I spoke with Philip Coon, the superintendent of Gallia County local schools, and what he told me about homeschooling in Ohio should alarm every single person watching this right now.
Okay, so to discuss this whole issue, of online schooling and homeschooling, I want to bring in Philip Coon. He is the superintendent of the Gallia County local school district out there in Gallia County, Ohio. This is where the Ciders children were enrolled in school for a time. So Philip Coon, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're busy getting ready for the school year and you're entering your 6th year now as superintendent.
Correct. Yeah. Excited about the school year.
Yeah. I know we're getting ready for it in my house too. Tell me if you would, you offer online schooling. You have a digital academy there in Gallia County, but the kids are online doing school. Do you have concerns about that? How do you feel about online schooling, despite the fact that you guys offer it?
Because here's what changed. In October of 2023, the state of Ohio passed legislation that fundamentally altered the homeschooling landscape. Before the change, parents who wanted to homeschool were required to submit their intended curriculum to the district. They had to have a licensed teacher sign off on the completion of that curriculum at the end of the year. Or they had to submit their child to state assessments so that progress could actually be measured. There was accountability. There was a paper trail. There was a way for the system to verify that education was actually happening. That's all gone now.
So I think that there are some real concerns with homeschooling, especially in Ohio, since it's changed in the last couple of years, that now, parents do not have to give you a curriculum that they're following, and there's no assessments that have to be completed. So it's for those people who don't do it well, sometimes they may not even know they're not doing it well because they're not giving assessments that would measure the growth of a child. So I do have real concerns about homeschooling in general. I will say again that some people do it, I think, probably pretty well, but there are a lot of people who struggle to meet the kind of standards or education that you would get in person.
Let's break that down a little bit. You said there was a change that took place. Prior to that change taking place in Ohio, were the parents required, when they were saying, hey, I'm going to homeschool my child, were they required to follow a curriculum and provide a curriculum? Or how did that work prior to this change?
The change happened in October of 23. And so before that time, parents would submit the curriculum that they would be using to provide instruction for reading, math, social studies, science, etc. And then there would have to be a licensed teacher that would sign off on the completion of that at the end of the year, or an assessment where, taking, a state assessment or a district level assessment so that you could measure the progress. And that way you can ensure that education was happening. Now, parents can simply just...
Under the current law, a parent simply submits a form stating their intention to homeschool. That's it. No curriculum review. No assessment requirement. No licensed teacher sign-off. No standardized testing. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. Once that form is submitted, the child is outside the district's reach entirely. Superintendent Coon told me this directly. When a child is enrolled in the district, even if they're chronically absent, the school can pursue diversionary hearings, involve law enforcement, work with juvenile court. But the moment a parent files that homeschool notification, all of that stops. The child vanishes from the system's radar. No mandatory reporters. No wellness checks built into the school day. No one ensuring that the child is even alive, let alone learning.
Unenrolled, we are still doing what we need to do to make contact with families, have diversionary hearings for attendance, involving law enforcement or the courts, juvenile court. But once they decide to go to homeschooling, we don't have a lot of teeth at that point. We don't have, they're outside of our reach.
Superintendent Coon used a phrase I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He called it educational neglect. And he's right. But I would go further. Because when you remove the single largest system of mandatory, reporting from a child's life, you're not just risking educational neglect. You're creating the perfect conditions for every other form of neglect to go undetected.
Really. I mean, we're not preparing a percentage of our students, to go out into the real world and be able to interact with other people, to be able to read at grade level, just to help them have the tools to be successful.
Okay. Now, I know that you really can't talk about the Ciders case. However, I'm going to just touch on something that is a concern related to that. And that is the concern that teachers and school superintendents such as yourself, school staff, are mandatory reporters when it comes to potential abuse and neglect.
Let me give you the numbers because they tell their own story. In Gallia County, 284 out of roughly 100 students are now homeschooled. That's 12 to 13%. 15 years ago, that number was 34. The jump didn't happen gradually. It accelerated during COVID and then exploded after the legislative change in October 2023.
I've researched it back over the last 15 or so years, and that number, has drastically increased. I think the first year that I looked at it, we were about 34 students being homeschooled. And then I think that number really took off during COVID when that was, happening regularly. And so, again, I think the change in legislation really accelerated that because now there's
And
really
Superintendent Coon told me something else that I want you to hear directly. He said that some families use homeschooling as a way to escape truancy proceedings. When the pressure to attend school creates a potential legal situation, parents can simply file that form and the legal obligation disappears.
284. We finished last year with 284 students being homeschooled out of approximately a little over 2,100 students. So we're somewhere between 12 to 13% of our students, potential students, that are being homeschooled at this time, which is a larger percentage, I think, than many other districts. But we've definitely seen that number, that percentage really climb over the years. I've researched it back over the last 15 or so years, and that number, has drastically increased. I think the first year that I looked at it, we were about 34 students being homeschooled. And then I think that number really took off during COVID when that was, happening regularly. And so, again, I think the change in legislation really accelerated that because now there's really no accountability. And so if another piece of this, I think, is chronic absenteeism. So we're responsible for reporting when students aren't, attending. And so when there's pressure to attend and there's potential, a legal situation, then parents can just choose.
I'm now going to ask you to do something. I want you to look at the timeline I've just laid out and ask yourself a specific question. Not whether homeschooling is good or bad. Not whether parents have the right to educate their children at home. Those are separate conversations. The question I want you to answer in the comments is this. Given everything you now know about the Cers case, which detail troubles you more? The fact that Elizabeth Ciders waited until the absolute deadline to enroll her children in online school in 2020, or the fact that she enrolled them for in-person school in 2021 and then never sent them a single day? Two choices. Both are facts. Both are documented. I want to know which one sits heavier with you and why. Now, let me address the counterargument, because it's a serious one, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. There are parents in Gallia County and across this country who homeschool their children exceptionally well. Superintendent Coon acknowledged this directly. He told me he attends church with families who homeschool for religious reasons, families with bright, well-adjusted children who are thriving. I believe him. Homeschooling, done right, with structure and accountability, and genuine educational investment can
The
work.
socialization.
I'm sure there are some families that do homeschooling really well. I know I go to church with several families that choose to homeschool and do that for religious reasons and have great kids and bright kids. I think it just depends on the family and whether their family structure can provide the right atmosphere for that. I think, like you said, the structure of being in school is, having to be at a certain place at a certain time, having to get up in the morning like we would do as adults to arrive at work. That's always beneficial. So it's the structure, I think, of being in person that is beneficial. And then I would say, generally speaking, there are many people who struggle with providing the instruction for homeschooling. And I think that we see
But
that.
here's the problem. The current Ohio law makes no distinction between the parent who carefully follows a rigorous curriculum and the parent who files a form and then does nothing. There is no mechanism to separate the devoted educator from the negligent one. And in a county where the homeschool population has grown from 34 to 284 in 15 years, the odds that every single one of those families is doing it well are, in Superintendent Coon's own estimation, very low. When homeschooled children eventually return to the public school system, he told me they are frequently well below grade level on standardized tests. That's not speculation. That's data. That's the direct experience of the educator responsible for every child in that district. And that brings me to the part of this that I think gets overlooked in policy debates. School is not just about reading and math. It's about the backpack of food that goes home over a long weekend so a child doesn't go hungry. It's the dental care provided in districts that offer it. It's the Christmas gifts for children who otherwise wouldn't receive any. It's the after-school programs that watch over kids while working parents finish their shifts. It's the teachers and counselors and nurses who are legally required to report suspected abuse the moment they see it. That system, imperfect as it may be, is a safety net. And when a child is removed from that system with no alternative accountability structure in place, the safety net disappears.
First ones to spot signs of neglect and abuse. So with regard to homeschooling, talk to me about the concern with that.
Well, like I was saying earlier, I think that, school districts, especially in rural areas such as ours, provide so much more than just an education. It is kind of that well check and making sure that kids have what they need. It's Christmas gifts at Christmas time. It's backpacks of food that go home with kids over a long weekend. It's dental care, that is provided sometimes within districts and provided within ours. So that it's really a whole child approach, I think, when kids are in our buildings, and that we can really monitor their needs and help support families, really. We're not here to go against parents or anything, we're here to support parents and provide where there are gaps in maybe their care. And that, I guess that would be another thing too, is just we have after school programs that we have within our buildings that help families, those working families, to have someone at home, to watch over their children when they're at work. So a lot of things I think that public education provide that's really necessary to raising a child. It's that whole, it takes a village to raise a child. We're part of that village.
Elizabeth Ciders herself was homeschooled. She withdrew from Gallia County local schools in 2008 when she was 15. That same year, she was married. That same year, she gave birth to her first child. I'm not drawing a connection. I'm telling you what the records show. You can decide what, if anything, that pattern tells you about how cycles repeat themselves when no one is watching.
Records show that Elizabeth Ciders attended Gallia County local schools when she was younger, but she withdrew in 2008 when she was 15 to take part in homeschooling. That was the same year she was married and gave birth to her first child. There's no record of Gary Ciders Jr. attending the schools. Gary Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina Ciders remain in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, charged with child endangering. They've all pleaded not guilty. Gary Sr.
The
is
16 Cers children are now in therapeutic foster care. They are safe, or at least safer than they were. We don't know the full extent of what they endured in the house on Omar Street, or the house on Honeysuckle, or any of the other places they lived. We may never know. But I can tell you this with absolute certainty. The system failed them long before the criminal charges were filed. The system failed them the moment they became invisible. I don't know when this case will go to trial. Gary Cers Jr., Elizabeth, and Christina Cers have all pleaded not guilty to child endangerment. Gary Sr. is free on bond. Attorneys for all four have raised competency issues. The wheels of justice turn slowly, and that's the honest truth. But here's what I can promise you. When there's a break in this case, when there's a hearing, when there's a development, you will hear about it here. I will keep digging. I will keep filing records requests. I will keep asking the questions that other people won't ask. Because these 16 children deserve at least that much. They deserve someone who won't look away just because the paperwork is filed and the forms are submitted and the legal boxes have been checked. 6 children. An entire school year. 0 days in a classroom. That is not a statistic. That is a warning. And the question now is whether anyone in Columbus is listening. I'm Anjit Levy. Thank you for being here. I'll see you back here next time.